One of the biggest stars in television history used to crack jokes about his marriages and his divorces.
But the king of late night, Johnny Carson, never mentioned the hush-hush romance that helped make him a lot of money right here in
January 23, 2005. The world seemed toe-stopped for a moment. He had been more than just a television host. He was a nightly companion to millions of Americans for over 30 years. As the host of The Tonight Show, Carson shaped late-night television into what it is today. His quickwit.com presence and ability to connect with guests made him an icon unlike any other. So, when news broke that he had died at the age of 79 from complications related to emphysema, it hit hard. Fans across the nation mourned deeply, remembering all the nights they ended their day with Johnny's voice filling their living rooms. But as tributes played across networks and celebrities shared their memories, something else began to circulate: whispers about Carson's private life. For a man so well known, Johnny had always been mysterious. He avoided interviews, stayed away from Hollywood parties, and rarely opened up about his personal feelings. To the public, he was warm and funny. To those who knew him closely, he was guarded, even distant. There were rumors that his Malibu estate held locked rooms and boxes that no one had ever opened. Some even believed he had left behind letters or notes that revealed his deepest thoughts, secrets that could change how people remember him. Carson's biographer, Bill Zim, once described him perfectly. Johnny Carson was an enigma, a man who gave everything on stage and nothing once the curtain closed. That statement would prove hauntingly true after his death. When his estate managers and close staff began to go through his possessions, they quickly realized how massive the task ahead of them was. His home was not just large, it was practically a museum. Every wall, shelf, and drawer carried memories from a long, remarkable career. There were boxers filled with scripts, shelves stacked with awards and pictures from some of the biggest moments in television history. But beyond all the trophies and souvenirs, there was a sense of secrecy. Johnny had lived in a breathtaking home perched high above the Pacific Ocean on the cliffs of Point Dume in Malibu, California. He bought the property in 1984 for $9.5 million, an enormous sum for the time, but for him, it wasn't just an investment, it was his escape. After decades of being in the spotlight, this was where he could finally find peace. The estate stretched over 4 acres with stunning ocean views that made it feel like the house was floating above the sea. Everything about the property spoke of tranquility. There were koi ponds, flower gardens, an aviary full of colorful birds, and fruit trees that swayed gently in the breeze. It was a paradise that reflected both his love for beauty and his need for privacy. The mansion itself was a masterpiece of design created by architect Ed Niles, built with tall glass walls and warm wood. The house seemed to dissolve into the landscape. You could stand in the living room and see the waves rolling below. The ceiling in the main atrium reached nearly 30 feet high, and inside grew real trees that stretched toward the sunlight filtering through the glass. Every inch of the space was a blend of nature and modern architecture, quiet, elegant, and deeply personal. Inside, the rooms were designed to fit Carson's dual personality, one part performer, one part recluse. The main floor had open spaces for entertaining, including a large kitchen, a wine cellar, and a media room where he lived to watch old shows and movies. The upper level was much more private. There he had his own bedroom suite, 2 home offices, and a private balcony with a perfect view of the Pacific. That was where he liked to sit alone, away from the noise of Hollywood, and simply watch the horizon. After his death, the estate staff worked carefully, room by room, sorting through his belongings. They found old letters, film reels, photos of guests like Frank Sinatra and Lucille Ball, and even scripts marked up in his own handwriting. But they also found something strange. Locked boxes, sealed drawers, and storage spaces labeled private. Some keys were missing entirely. There were areas of the house that his assistants said no one had entered in years, and one place stood out more than all the others. His garage, Carson's garage, was known to exist, of course, but no one had been inside it since his illness worsened years before. It was said to be one of his favorite places, the one area where he could work with his hands and be completely alone. To Carson, it wasn't just a storage space for vehicles. It was his retreat where he could think, tinker, and escape. So, when the executives of his estate finally walked to the garage door and reached for the handle, there was a sense of nervous excitement. No one knew exactly what they would find, but they all felt that whatever was inside would reveal something about Johnny Carson that the world had never seen before. The moment the garage door creaked upward, a sliver of sunlight cut through the dust, lighting up what looked like rows of gleaming metal. The sound echoed off the concrete walls, and for a moment, everyone stood in silence. What they saw inside wasn't just a collection of cars. It was a time capsule frozen in place, untouched since Carson had left it. There, parked neatly in rows, were some of the most beautiful and rare vehicles ever made. But more than their value, each one told a story about Johnny Carson, not the TV host, but the man behind the laughter. At the far end under a canvas cover sat a faded 1939 Chrysler Royal. It was old and simple compared to the others, but it had deep sentimental value. This was the car that had once belonged to Carson's father. It was the car in which Johnny had learned to drive back in Nebraska long before Hollywood or fame. This car wasn't about luxury. It was about roots, the reminder of where he came from. He had kept it in perfect condition all those years. And in his will, he later gifted it to his friend and fellow late-night host Jay Leno. It was as if Johnny wanted the legacy of laughter in cars to continue with someone who understood both. Next to it stood a shining piece of history. A 1981 DeLorean DMC-12. Its silver stainless steel body gleamed even in the dim light, and its famous glowing doors stretched upward like wings. Carson had been one of the early investors in the DeLorean Motor Company, putting in around $500,000 to help bring the futuristic car to life. He believed in its vision and design, a symbol of progress and imagination. But the car also had a story, one that made Carson laugh about himself. During a test drive, the DeLorean's electronic system malfunctioned, trapping him inside. He had to bang on the window until someone came to rescue him. Later, he joked about it on The Tonight Show, turning an embarrassing moment into comedy gold. Now, years after his passing, that same car stood silent in his garage, still polished and spotless. It represented both his humor and his risk-taking nature, willing to believe in something new, even if it failed. Beside the DeLorean was a pristine white 1988 Mercedes-Benz 560. This car was all about elegance and comfort. Carson loved to drive it along the Malibu coast in the early mornings before the paparazzi were awake. He enjoyed those quiet rides, just him and the ocean air. His assistant said that sometimes he would take long drives with no destination, just thinking, reflecting, and escaping the noise off aim. The deeper they went into the garage, the more they discovered. There were Ferraris, classic Corvettes, and even a few motorcycles. But what amazed everyone wasn't just the number of cars, it was how organized everything was. Every vehicle was spotless. Tools were arranged perfectly on the walls. Shelves held car. But that wasn't all they found. A man who valued peace more than fame, solitude more than applause. For decades, he had mastered the art of keeping his private life separate from his public one. And now in death, that separation still stood, but with small cracks that allowed people to finally see the real Johnny. His staff and estate team often spoke later about how humble they felt walking through his home. They said that every object seemed to have a story. Every corner carried emotion. There were trophies, awards, and reminders of success. But there were also signs of a man searching for meaning beyond it all. After his death, Fans from around the world sent letters and flowers to his estate thanking him for the years of laughter. Many said the same thing. Johnny Carson made them feel less alone. And that perhaps was his greatest gift, his ability to connect without revealing too much of himself. In the end, the discoveries inside his garage weren't shocking in a scandalous way. They were shocking because they were so simple, so human. The cars, the letters, the orderliness. They told the history of a man who, despite all his fame, still longed for normalcy. The garage remains one of the most personal spaces Johnny Carson ever created. A sanctuary of steel, glass, and memory, standing there surrounded by silence and sunlight. You could almost imagine him, sleeves rolled up, hands covered in oil, quietly working on an engine while the ocean waves crashed in the distance. Johnny Carson left behind more than television history. He left behind lessons about humility, about boundaries, and about the power of mystery. He proved that sometimes the most fascinating things about a person aren't the ones they show on stage, but the ones they quietly keep locked away. And perhaps that's why even years after his passing, people still talk about him. His laughter, his timing, his charm, they were unforgettable. But now, thanks to what was found in his garage, the world also knows the quieter truth. Johnny Carson wasn't just the king of late night. He was a man who cherished privacy, craftsmanship, and the small private joys that fame could never buy. When you think about it, maybe that's what makes the story so powerful. It reminds us that even the brightest stars need a place to hide from the light, a space where they can simply be themselves. And for Johnny Carson, that place was his garage. When Johnny Carson passed away in 2005, the world said goodbye to more than a late-night talk show host. It lost a man who had defined American television for more than 3 decades. For over 30 years, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson was the heart of late-night TV. He was funny, charming, and quick-witted. A man who could make millions of people laugh with just one raised eyebrow or clever remark. Yet, despite the fame, Johnny was one of the most private people in Hollywood. While he brought joy to millions, very few people actually knew the real man behind the screen. So, when his estate was finally opened after his death, what was found inside his private garage didn't just surprise people. It completely changed the way many saw him. The garage, tucked away behind his home in Malibu, was like stepping into a time capsule. It was quiet, dusty, and lined with old cars covered in soft gray sheets. To most people, it looked like an ordinary garage. But to those who knew Carson, they knew this space was sacred. Johnny wasn't the kind of man who displayed his trophies or awards in his living room. He didn't have walls covered with photos of famous friends or talk show guests. Instead, he kept his life's memories hidden in this garage. And when the executives of his estate opened those doors, they didn't expect to find what they did. At first, it was the cars that caught everyone's attention. Johnny Carson loved cars, and his collection reflected his changing moods and the stages of his life. There was a sleek Mercedes-Benz, elegant, simple, and quiet, just like Johnny himself. He had owned it for more than 10 years, long after newer models had come out. It wasn't flashy or loud. It was a symbol of comfort and style, a perfect reflection of the man who wanted to move through life unnoticed when the cameras were off. Then there was his 1992 Chevrolet Corvette's final car. This was the last vehicle Johnny ever bought. The car he drove during the last chapter of his life. Many believed he kept it not just for its design, but because it symbolized freedom. It was said that driving that car alone along the California coast was one of the few times he truly felt at peace. But what really grabbed attention was a rare 19, an Italian-made luxury car known for its beauty and rarity. Only about 50 were ever made. Finding one in pristine condition in Carson's garage was like finding a hidden treasure. Its curvy body and exotic design suggested a side of Johnny most people never knew existed, a man with a taste for the extraordinary and the mysterious. Yet, the cars were just the beginning. As the team went deeper into the garage, they found boxes stacked against the walls.